We've been keeping the Sabbath for thousands of years. But what if most of us have never actually understood what it was really pointing to? And I don't mean that in a casual, new interpretation way. I mean, what if something about it has been sitting in plain sight the entire time and we just never connected the dots? Stop for a second, because this is where it starts to feel a little uncomfortable. What if the weekly rhythm you've protected your whole life, the one you grew up hearing about, the one tied to obedience and rest and sacred time, what if it was never meant to stand alone as just a calendar pattern? What if it was originally anchored to something you can still see tonight with your own eyes? Something still hanging in the sky above you. Something that hasn't stopped moving since the beginning of creation. It felt unsettling to me too when I first came across it. On the surface, everything looks settled, a day of rest, a boundary between the sacred and the ordinary, something passed down faithfully through generations. But every now and then, a quiet tension surfaces in the text, a sense that something older is still whispering underneath. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just there, like a shadow you keep catching in the corner of your eye. To feel this, you almost have to go back. Picture yourself there, around 1446 BCE, a ragged group of former slaves, still tasting freedom for the first time, camped under the vast open sky in Sinai.
No phones, no calendars, no artificial lights anywhere, just the wind moving through the tents at night, and stars so clear they almost hurt to look at. For them, time wasn't something abstract. It wasn't locked in a system run by distant authorities. Time was something alive above them, something you could see with your own eyes if you simply looked up. That's where my own thinking began to shift. God placed lights in the sky on the fourth day, the sun, the moon, the stars, but He didn't create them only for light and seasons. He said they were for signs and for appointed times. That word, moed, kept pulling at me, because it's the same word used later for every festival, every sacred gathering, every appointed meeting between God and His people. Once that started sinking in, I began noticing the moon in places I hadn't expected. Passover always falling on the 14th of the month, a full moon night. Tabernacles on the 15th, full moon again. The whole sacred calendar seemed to breathe along with the lunar rhythm. And then another layer quietly appeared. The prophets, Amos, Isaiah, Hosea, kept pairing the new moon and the Sabbath together, treating them almost like close relatives in the language of sacred time. Not once or twice, across different centuries. That repetition stayed with me. Some ancient patterns seemed to fit those voices. A month that began with the new moon as its own day of rest, followed by 6 work days, then Sabbath on the 8th, and again on the 15th, when the moon was at its brightest. In a world without electricity, that would have meant the Sabbath arriving on the night when the heavens themselves were blazing with light. The sky wasn't just background. It felt like it was participating. I don't share this to settle any argument. The scholarly conversation around these patterns is still alive, respectful, and complex. Not everyone sees the same shape, but the tension in the text is real, and it left me sitting with an uncomfortable but honest question. What if the Sabbath was never meant to be only a rule on a calendar? What if it was designed as something more alive? A living conversation between God's people and the visible rhythm He wrote into the sky from the very beginning. Now here's the part that actually makes me pause longer. In 587 BCE, the world came crashing down. The temple was destroyed, Jerusalem left in ruins, God's people carried off to Babylon, and the prophet in Lamentations records something haunting. God made Zion forget her appointed times and her Sabbaths. Not just pause them, forget. That single word has stayed with me, because in that foreign land, far from the familiar cycles of the moon and the land they knew, the leaders made a profound choice. They anchored the Sabbath to a steady, unbroken 7-day rhythm. Portable, resilient, strong enough to survive exile, dispersion, and centuries of uncertainty. And it did survive, beautifully. For over 2,000 years, it carried families through darkness we can barely imagine. That rhythm is mercy. It is a gift, and we should hold it with deep gratitude, never lightly. Still, the older question lingers quietly in the background. If exile brought forgetting, what might restoration look like? What if part of God making all things new includes gently remembering the visible witness He placed in the heavens during the first week of creation? That possibility brings a strange mixture of hope and quiet unease. Because when I look at our lives today, it lands heavier. We try our best to guard the day. We silence notifications. We fight for rest. But the blue light from screens still lingers behind our eyes. City lights wash out the moon so completely that many of us couldn't tell you its phase even if we tried. We read the words signs and appointed times, and our minds immediately jump to a digital calendar. The ancient heart simply looked up. The heavens never forgot their rhythm. We stopped looking. And that's what carries the most weight for me personally. The Sabbath was never meant to be a private spiritual discipline you squeeze in despite the world. It feels more like a living correspondence, your rest moving in step with the visible testimony God wrote into the sky on the fourth day. When you rest, you're not stepping outside of reality. You're stepping into its deepest, oldest pulse. The same pulse the moon has kept faithfully month after month since the beginning. It's quiet proof, written in light, that God always completes what He begins. The moon vanishes into total darkness and then returns every single month. Grace gets the last word, always has. The continuous weekly cycle was kindness in a time of fracture. It still is. But the same God who gave us that kindness is also gently saying, "Look up again." So I'm left holding this question tonight. What would it look like for you, for your family, if the Sabbath became a little more visible again? Not by abandoning the faithful rhythm that carried generations through every storm, but by softly reconnecting it to whatever phase the moon holds right now. Maybe a few quiet minutes outside. Maybe letting your children stand with you under the sky. Maybe simply remembering in your body that the darkness of any hard week is never the final word. What might shift inside your heart if the holy day felt less like something you must protect and more like something you get to step into? A rhythm that's been singing since the first week of creation. You don't have to resolve the whole conversation today. None of us can. The discussion is deep, ongoing, and deserves honesty and respect. This isn't a final answer. It's an open door, an invitation. If something in you stirred today, even quietly, if the night sky feels a little less ordinary when you step outside later, that's enough. And if there's someone you care about whose walk feels tired, whose Sabbath has grown mechanical and hollow, maybe share these thoughts with them. Sometimes the root of moed, that word for appointed meeting, becomes the quiet answer a heart has been searching for without knowing how to name it.
Because this is what happens when old roots are uncovered. The story doesn't fall apart. It doesn't demand we reject what came before. It simply deepens. It opens wider. It invites us further into the fullness God always intended. And somehow, when you step outside tonight and look up, the sky feels different, doesn't it?